YouTube, this is Larry. I'm your mentor, your friend. Jumping on here again. We've got one of my guests, one of my favorite people that I've had on here to talk to, Kyle Swafford. He's an attorney, and he is, just itching to get on here and help you guys level up your legal investing career because, it's a situation where you have to have your law basis set in order to be successful. So, I'm not going to try and steal his thunder. So, Kyle, welcome to the show. This is Real Estate Investing with Larry Fiero. And, you pretty much have helped me out quite a bit. So why don't you jump in here, tell me a little bit, tell the subscribers here a little bit about what your story is and go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Larry, and thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I've kind of been following you in the background. I think what you're doing with your YouTube page is really impressive to the extent that you don't recognize it sometimes. I wanted to give you a brief reminder before we got into me.
I appreciate
as far as little old me and my attorney background, I've always known that I was going to be an attorney. Like since I was 5, I wanted to be an attorney. My parents aren't one. I don't have like an uncle that is or anything like that. Truth be told, I was probably too young to watch Liar Liar, but I did, and I thought it was so funny. Maybe I say 5, maybe I was 8. I don't know. But that show, I just thought that movie I thought was so funny. And then, every little thing, along the way in my life just kind of made me always want to be an attorney. By the time I was in junior high, I knew that I wanted to be. And I kind of knew I would focus on business in my mind. And when I was in law school, I did a lot of business classes, tax classes, partnership, things of that nature. Not as many trial litigation type courses as you might think. Then I graduated law school and didn't know what to do. I had an accounting bachelor's in college, so I went to the University of Florida and begged them to let me in their tax program, and they did because I held up a sign. No, I'm kidding. But I did beg. I begged them, and they said, well, somebody, probably fell out, so we'll just take you, I guess. And I did tax law for another year. So I went to law school for 3 years and then specialized in tax for 1. That's actually where I met my wife. She was a first-year law student at the University of Florida. I was getting my LLM. And then I went to Deloitte, a Big 4 accounting firm. For those that don't know what Deloitte is, I was doing international tax work, largely treaty analysis. What happens if a company incorporates in Germany and then license the IP in Scotland and things like that, right? Like that type of thing. And then sales to American customers. What would that look like? So I eventually got back into the legal space, was doing a lot of tax controversy work, representing taxpayers against the IRS. And then COVID happened and I was laid off like so many other people during that time. I stumbled into commercial real estate, an SEC compliance law firm. 2 weeks in on the job, I knew I was good at it. 2 months in, I knew I loved it and wanted to do it the rest of my life. After a year and a half at that firm, I had established a good client basis of my own, getting out there and DMing anyone with a pulse on LinkedIn, but it worked. And, I hoarded myself out a little bit, but it paid. So, and then I started, you got to do what you got to do. I started my firm January of 2023, and here I am still doing the same thing I was when I started, which is commercial real estate, typically multifamily, self-storage, RV parks, things of that nature, with the capital raising SEC compliance regulations that come with that. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And that's kind of how I started in my journey and kind of where I'm at now from a career standpoint.
Okay. So what I'm hearing Kyle, is that you have your own practice. You got your own practice, which means in essence that you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, and you have the mindset of a real estate investor because you've been doing this and you are in real estate investing yourself. So that is huge. One of the things that I like touching base with all my guests is the mindset, getting through the comfort zone.
I'm currently got some real estate projects that are development. So I'm going through the entitlement and zoning stage. So they're not CO'd yet. So, a real estate investor, probably more of a developer, and soon to be a real estate. Some projects.
That's very cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a journey. I mean, as you know, offline, they're kind of happening at the same time. One's in the county, one's in the city of Oxford, Mississippi, and the entitlement process are kind of staggered a little bit. And hopefully September's a good month. We'll see. And I think whenever that time comes, I'd love to give all the feedback I can on what I learned just in that process, let alone before even a shovel hit dirt.
Right. So Kyle, you were at a big accounting firm. What made you decide to go out on your own? What made you decide to step away from that?
Well, when I was at the accounting firm, an old professor of mine gave me some advice, which is if you want to have a good career, stay into the big four accounting firms. But if you want to get back into the legal field, don't overstay your welcome, because law firms will eventually view you as an accountant, not an attorney. So I got out of Deloitte about a year and a month or so, and then got into the law practice. Whenever I left my previous law firm to start my own firm, it was kind of a multitude of reasons, but the main one that I felt called towards was helping people. I kind of felt on the one hand that, you go to these conferences and you see all these different attorneys, and maybe they're giving a presentation, maybe they have a booth or whatnot, but if they kind of get the sense that you're a beginner, they tend to just dump your file on an associate's desk. I know that because I was the associate, and that's totally fine. The associates need to get their reps in, so to speak, and whatnot. But for me, I'm the only attorney at my firm. My wife's an attorney too, and she helps out here and there, but she's, we're expecting our third child in about a week or two, so she's not doing too much right now. So it's really just me and yeah, thank you. So it's really just me and my paralegal. So I help everyone, the clients that are sophisticated and have done a bunch of transactions, and the beginners that I meet along the way. And, one of the things that I've always felt so called to do is try to maybe elevate the beginners a little bit so that they avoid some of the hurdles that group can sometimes stumble and fall into, so that they avoid those and have a smoother transaction. Because Larry, as you know, a real estate closing is just challenging. It really doesn't matter what it is. It's always something. It is just simply always something. And if there are things that we can do along the way to make it a smoother process and a less stressful process, that's kind of what I wanted to do and help and give back to, people just now getting into the space, from LOI tips, PSA, due diligence, capital raising, all of it, So it's my goal that your subscribers or the viewers here will come away with something that just kind of elevates their game just a little bit, so that they can close more and more deals faster and with a little less stress than will inevitably be there nonetheless.
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's absolutely it. And one of the things that I'm talking about, I actually have a live tonight at 7:00, and I'm talking about setting up your community and getting your team in place. So how important is an attorney on the real estate team, and how early do you feel that they should get an attorney on board so they can help them set up?
Yeah, so I appreciate that as an attorney. A lot of these, and sometimes I can answer something and it come off with like a personal bias. I do want people to know that my lawyering style is I don't give advice that I wouldn't take myself, because I don't think it's helpful to say, well, it depends, and then give a non-answer.
Right.
I think if it's a small deal, and by small deal to me in a commercial real estate context, I'm talking less than 1.5 million, maybe. If it's a smaller deal and you could maybe get by without an attorney initially if you use like the broker PSA form, I suppose. I don't recommend that once deals get into that 1.5 million range and up, because even if you need no operational reserves, no punitive closing reserves for your loan docs or anything like that, I mean, what, 1.5 million, 30% of that is probably still going to be what, $450,000.
Yeah.
That's not nothing. And if you don't have that capital, you need to protect your investors' capital or your partner's capital. And broker PSAs, as much as a broker may tell a beginner, we've used these countless times, a beginner should never have to apologize for other people's poor operations, right? If other people wanted to blindly trust a document prepared by a broker whose sole relationship in this is the seller, whose entire commission is based on the sales price, I couldn't think of a more biased document, right? So, I mean, sellers and realtors and they are paid by sellers. So it doesn't make sense for them to have standard form PSAs that favor the buyer in any conceivable way, right? So I just tell people, if you're using other people's money, investors or partners, whatever, you're going to get to a point where this is a $1.5 million transaction, or 5, 7, 10, whatever. Pay to have good counsel advise you, so that if something inevitably comes up, maybe the MD is refundable, maybe it's not, things like that. It's just a broker PSA, and we'll get to this in a second when I kind of elaborate on some other tips. But my general view is, if one document could be used for any asset class, that doesn't make it good. It makes it vague, right? If all we can do is check a box and now rents don't apply because it's a land deal, why would you want that anyways? If it, if the same thing can be used for everything, it inherently lacks specificity. So that's why I tell people, get an attorney, and I tell them, get your attorney involved at the LOI stage. So why don't we start there with some kind of tips that I think some beginners could avoid with that? Does that work for you, Larry?
Right. Oh yeah, no, that definitely works for me. And I just wanted to, so the PSA, I just want clarification for myself, because I'm new into the syndication and all that area, going bigger. The PSA is the purchase and sale agreement for the new investors out here. The EMD, that's the earnest money deposit, and that's the money that they have to put down to make sure that the contract is legal. And then you got the LOI, which is the letter of intent, which is the initial offer to the seller, correct? And the LOI is not legally binding until it gets to the PSA stage, if I'm
That's correct.
all that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll try not to use abbreviations.
No, you use what you do what you do, and I'll try and make sure that I decipher it for myself as well as the subscribers, because this is fascinating stuff. Because one of the things that I find fascinating about it, and the reason that I recommend on larger projects, the bigger the project, the sooner you need to bring in an attorney, because you could, depending on the setup of and you actually just reminded me of that a little bit ago. The bigger the project, the more you have regulations that you have to make sure you're within, like certain regulations, SEC and things like that. So you have to get an attorney's advice fast on big projects.
Yeah. So I think, and to speak to that, I think it's always worth an attorney spending 5 minutes just reviewing your LOI to make sure that it's kind of clear and clean, because even recently this year, kind of early summer, I had a client submit an LOI, and they wanted to imply that the EMD was refundable if the loan assumption didn't get approved. It was a deal where they were going to assume the seller's loan as a part of the purchase price. And obviously, if that can take a long time depending on the bank. And usually the due diligence period is 30 days, maybe 45 days, something like that, right, in a commercial transaction. So the paperwork on the loan assumption can sometimes take 60 to 90 days because it's an agency loan or even a local bank loan. they're just not really incentivized to assist with a loan assumption because they got paid once the loan was issued, and then assuming it, there's not as much money in it. So it's easy to put that on the back burner. So if the buyer would have known that they wouldn't have qualified for the loan assumption in the future, they would have never entered the agreement, and their earnest money would have never gone non-refundable, right? So you want to put in the PSA and certainly the LOI that it can be refundable if I don't get approved. And my client just didn't word it that way. And once we got to the PSA negotiation, the seller's counsel just would not let up on that fact. So you are correct, Larry, that a LOI, letter of intent, is a non-binding agreement, but it is absolutely the focal point and lens through which sellers and sellers' counsels will hold the buyer accountable in the purchase and sell agreement negotiations. I've had it happen countless times where, I've had a client submit an LOI that clearly had two sentences back to back, and one was meant to be deleted because it said the financing contingency begins on the effective date, and then the next sentence it said the financing contingency begins at the end of the inspection period. Okay. Well, which one do you think the seller went with? Right.
With the more favorable one.
With the more favorable
for
one,
them.
Right? Yeah. So, one little bit of guidance that I'll give to your listeners is it's about leverage here, and kind of think about this for a second. The seller has 100% of the leverage until the contract is signed, because even if a seller needs to sell, they don't have to sell to you. They can take the best terms and negotiate and whatnot, and you can't force them to accept your offer, right? So they have all of the leverage. But once the agreement is signed, now the buyer has 100% of the leverage, because the buyer is going to dictate whether or not you close, or whether or not you exercise the termination right in the inspection period, whether or not you close on time, whether or not you do a closing date extension. So as long as you have enough time in your PSA, you now control the timeline, and the seller can't do anything about it. If they refuse to sign the deed, you just sue them for specific performance to honor the contract, right? So I tell that to people, this because the sellers have all the leverage, they will use that LOI, poorly drafted language perhaps, against you in the PSA negotiation. And if you're like, oh, that was a typo, I didn't mean to put that, tough titty, they're not going to care. They're just move on to a buyer that will accept that, provision. So, which kind of leads me to when you're doing your LOI, if you just don't want to use an attorney on it because you just want to do it yourself, or Claude made one for you, just read it. Just read the LOI. Yeah. It should be no longer than 2 pages and should take you 5 minutes. Because if you refer to yourself as like a buyer in one instance and a purchaser in another sentence, it's just not going to look as professionally clean. And you need to look at this from the viewer's perspective. The first person viewing your offer letter is a broker, right? And they need a surety of closing because they only get paid at closing, right? So if you have typos, inconsistent language, lack of general clarity as to whether something's refundable or not, you make yourself look at a minimum unsophisticated, possibly like a beginner, and then having never met you before, most likely the broker will think this person can't close. And even if you have the best offer, they might just throw it in the waste bin and not even present it to their client because it's just somebody fishing, right? So, take the time to make sure that it's clean, error-free. Use full align on Microsoft Word. It makes it to where all the words hit at the end in a clean, crisp line. It makes it more presentable and readable. And put the LOI in a business name. Don't submit LOIs as an individual, because I don't have a client that has closed a transaction that puts LOIs in their individual name. I don't have one. No. Because they have a company, they have, I have Blue Delta Capital, like I think you have Lone Wolf Enterprises. Forgive me if I'm
Arctic Wolf. Yep.
Arctic Wolf. Sorry. Yeah. So
no, you're good. And you need that for the LLC because that's asset protection. That's why you
Correct.
have to have your attorney early on, because any attorney is going to recommend that you have an LLC and put all your assets within this LLC to protect personal capital and all that. So that's that. I'm glad
Correct.
that you brought that up, because that's an important stipulation on a couple of things that you said that I'd like to touch on a little bit. Because if you act like you have no idea what you're doing in real estate, people are less likely to take you seriously. And
Mhm.
I've told that to every one of my students. If you don't know a few things, if you don't know how to speak the language, if you don't know what the actual LOI is, if you start acting like you don't know what's going on, then people are going to treat you like that. So learn ahead. And also, one of my big pet peeves, and I kind of chuckled when you said about Claude, one of my pet peeves is AI is not an attorney. AI is not there yet. One of my biggest pet peeves is, they people are putting out mass AI stuff, and just in general, and they don't spell correctly, they don't have the right language, they get things wrong, and people just assume that they're infallible, and they're not. So make sure that you're getting that attorney for that LOI. I agree with that.
I agree with you. And I just want to touch on the AI point since you brought it up. I had a client, they're no longer a client, earlier in this year, and they were using AI to review a fairly intricate purchase and sell agreement. This was easily a $15 million deal, which comes with very seller favorable PSAs and whatnot, right? And all this stuff. And they dumped it into AI. So now I'm not even having a conversation with my client anymore. I'm having a conversation with like what my client's AI brings up, which is fine, whatever. But one of the things that AI kept harping on was that the contract wasn't assignable. And I was like, it says that seller's consent is required to assign the PSA. However, that consent shall not be required if it's being assigned to an entity the buyer controls, which is very common, right? Yeah. Very common language. Standard and even broker templates, and AI kept saying that the agreement wasn't assignable. And I was like, I wasn't like yelling at my client, but they were like, well, 5 of us agree with AI. And I was like, well, 5 of you plus AI are wrong then. Because and I pulled it up and I said word for word. It was like, well, it's misleading. I was like, it's just so that I can edit this document, to the best of my abilities on your behalf, specifically what part is misleading so that I know how to edit it, And I was like, well, let's just move on, So AI is a great tool. And in the same way that Google was a great tool, and it's just not there yet, and it depends on the input based on the output that you give it. One last thing I want to touch on with LOIs is whatever you put in your LOI, put in there that the purchaser or buyer, whichever word you want to use, will provide the first draft of the PSA, because I don't think a lot of buyers realize that the LOI is the first and last time that a document in this transaction will be 100% to your benefit, right? Because one, you're preparing it. It's your offer. It's your terms. They can counter it. When the PSA comes, there'll be some stuff like purchaser can't do this, has to keep things confidential and blah, blah, blah. So like, this is the first and last time that this document is going to be 100% in favor of you. And so many times, beginners will not indicate who's providing the first draft of the PSA. So the broker will send one, and now the brokers promise the seller a faster closing timeline because attorneys aren't getting involved, and or the seller's counsel has prepared it, and what do you think they did? A favorable agreement. If you put in there that the buyer will provide a first draft of the PSA, it's going to do 3 things. It's going to show initiative. That's number 1. Number 2, it's going to indicate that you don't want to sign a broker PSA for reasons we talked about earlier, that they're inherently seller friendly and poorly constructed documents. And 3, that your attorney will now be drafting the agreement from home field advantage, right? With only you in mind. And I think a lot of people will put themselves behind the 8 ball on the PSA negotiation front because they didn't think, oh, I could have avoided this and had, my person prepare the agreement and it would have been less time. Like I spend maybe an hour putting a PSA together for a client. I'll easily spend 2 reviewing a seller's because they have all these tricks and clauses and things like that, lack reps and warranties. So it's crucial to to not only have an attorney review a PSA on your behalf, but let them draft the first document in the transaction for you.
That way, the 2 hours of going through the PSA is on the seller and not you. His attorney has to go over your document versus the reverse role. So that's actually
right.
That's very good. I had not heard that before, which I'm going to start implementing that, honestly, because I'm just used to a deal where the seller's attorney just provides it, and I'm the one paying my attorney to go through it with a fine tooth comb and make sure that everything is favorable to me. So that's
which it
excellent.
won't be, right?
No.
Because
No.
right.
But they say in a great negotiation that everybody's supposed to walk away somewhat happy and somewhat miserable if it's a successful negotiation.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of like my PSA negotiation style. There are a lot of attorneys that redline everything because they need to justify their hourly rate or they want to win every battle. And I go into it from, there's probably only like 3 things my client cares about. The rest of it doesn't matter. If the seller can get something that they're happy about on those other non-material things to my client, fantastic. But I'm not going to sit here and fight over which title company we use. I will fight over which contingencies we allow in the agreement and their start and end date, right? Because that might be material depending on the type of deal. So there's usually a way to meet in the middle. But
so you pick your battles.
Pick your battles for sure. For sure. I agree
Excellent.
with that.
Great advice. So for the newbies out there, if you could give one piece of advice when picking a lawyer or making an offer, would you have like the end all be all advice that they can use in regards to lawyers? What would be your one piece of advice to them?
In terms of
just
building their team out,
legal advice, just setting up their legal team. I mean, if going from a position of not having to need lawyers to every decision that you make as a real estate investor is requiring a lawyer, what would your advice be to getting that perfect team member?
So the ABA, American Bar Association, did a study years back. I would imagine it's probably still true, but at the time, 5 or 6 years ago, the number one bar complaint was over responsiveness.
Oh, okay.
It typically wasn't fees. It typically wasn't whether somebody won or lost. It was usually responsiveness. And in the commercial real estate space, particularly multifamily, capital raising, self-storage, there's a lot of overlap with some of the law firms that you see at these different conferences. And usually what they do is law firms and entrepreneurs can do this to a fault, but particularly lawyers, they have such a scarcity mindset, and it's completely a lack of faith. I don't know how, to the extent some of your listeners are religious, but to even the faith-based attorneys, it becomes such a scarcity mindset that they say yes to everyone. And I have a firm belief that if you say yes to everyone, you will eventually say no to everyone. Yes, we can do your deal. Yes, we've done self-storage. Yes, we've done ground-up multifamily development. Yes, we can da-da-da. And then it's, no, I can't meet that Tuesday deadline. I'll get it to you Friday. Hey, I didn't get to it. It'll be Monday. And it just snowballs because they take on everything before they can actually have the capacity to service it. One of the rule of thumbs that law firms have is for every attorney they have, they want enough work for 1.5 attorneys. So that's when they know they need to hire the next person. And that just means that, which is a good problem to have, that you have more than you can handle, right? But a lot of law firms just lose clients due to responsiveness. So if I'm ever interviewing an attorney, and I do this with any service provider, civil engineers, architects, anyone, I say, do you have the capacity for my project? Because I like you, I like your vibe, I think we would work well together. But I don't want to be in a situation where I'm waiting a week for a response, multiple days, 2 weeks at a time, whatever. Like, if now's not a good time for your business, that's totally fine. Just let me know now. I don't want to find out the wrong way, which is absolutely regretting having ever worked with you. So my recommendation to anybody, and I even ask me, what is your current capacity to be able to service this project? And if they aren't prepared for that question, and many times they won't be, you'll probably be able to tell. So capacity is the number one thing. Is what I would be looking at as a someone looking to engage in hired service.
Right, right. And that goes back to just a simple concept of customer service.
Yeah.
And, if they can't offer you the kind of customer service that you need to have to get this deal across the finish line, then you need to keep looking. And that's like you said, with whatever you deal with. I'm having a situation right now with contracting. It's the same kind of situation because people take on everything. Yes, I can do it. Yes, I can do it. And then no, I can't
Yeah.
make it there on Monday. I can't make it there. I can't finish this. I don't know how to do, so that works on many industries. So hold them accountable to customer service.
Yeah, it's like throwing a birthday party knowing that you can only invite 10 people, but you send out birthday invitations to 30 people. And it's like, well, eventually now you got to tell some people that they can't come, right? And I just think poor business I think that's a good analogy to poor business as a whole. So that's what I would ask. I think fit is important, obviously, with anybody that you hire, and I'll joke with people like I've joked with you. I'm not for everyone, right? I'm not this incredibly formal person. I don't use, whole dollar words, I'm kind of in the nickel bin, but I think that I like to joke. If you send me a text, I might respond with a GIF because that's just who I am. Right. And if that's a good fit, then we should talk about capacity. So it's fit and capacity for sure. Undeniably.
Very good. Yeah. No, then that goes for everything. So that's excellent advice. So Kyle, I usually like to, I think we're coming around about 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes. I try and keep it in that zone. And you've been a fantastic guest. And I'm going to watch this video while we're editing it. I'm going to see if there was some holes that I missed because on the fly, I try and cover everything. But, if you'd be willing to come back, I would appreciate having a follow-up at another time, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. I think we spent time today kind of like LOI, but there's PSA thoughts, due diligence, capital raising, and stuff like that. So much. We could do a whole playlist on that alone. I would like to leave your community with one thing, if I can.
Absolutely.
And in commercial real estate, I don't know how many of your people are syndicators or even know what that is yet. That's a syndicator is someone that raises money from passive investors to acquire properties and then they kind of run them themselves.
Crowdfunding,
generally speaking,
type situation.
Crowdfunding kind of thing. Yeah. So if you are relying on investors for your deals, build your own investor base. Because one problem that I see with a lot of beginners is they'll have a good deal, but they won't have the capital for it. And they think that if they have a good deal, then the capital will come. And it doesn't typically work that way. And then once they realize that, they try to rely on other people to raise the capital for them. And, it's one thing to rely on other people's money, which is your investors. It's another thing to rely on other people's money, which is capital raisers, other people, and then you don't control any of it, right? Yeah. So I would argue that if you have a good deal, and I think you have a moral obligation to ask your network about it. Compliantly, that's a whole thing too, but like if you think that there's if you think there's an investor that is well to do and would invest in your project, but you're afraid to ask them because, why would I invest with you? And what do you know about flex space or industrial warehouses or apartment complexes, blah, blah, blah. I think you are having a conversation with yourself, not the investor, right? Obviously. Oh. And I think you have a moral obligation to try to share something that creates a financial benefit for people within your community to support their families and their philanthropic goals. And Larry, you and I know a lot of successful people as we slowly try to climb into that world ourselves. I don't know any genuinely wealthy people where they worked for it, which is most of people, and they actively poo-poo someone for reaching out to them about an investment opportunity. It may not be a good time, whatever, but very rarely are they ever just rude and mad and mean about it. So don't let the fear of something that probably isn't even real stop you from, I think, your moral obligation to better yourself, better your family, better your community at large, which includes your investor in that.
Yeah. And I always say you're never going to catch grief from somebody doing more than you are. You only get that from the people that seem to be doing less than you are and try and hold you back. So like you 100%. Said, that's an excellent piece of advice. I actually just ran into a situation where I had a deal that kind of went sideways a little bit because of, the fact that you get used to a private money lender, you get used to your capital group, but you have to have backups. And that's what kind of bit me when the original main basically investor for me wasn't able to participate. So you always have to have a backup. Have a backup for your backup for your backup, because your network is your net worth. So that's
right.
Excellent advice. Now, where can the subscribers get a hold of you? Where can they read about you? Do you have social media? Do you have a website? I always like to try and promote that. If you got the bandwidth to take on more clients, where do you want more clients contacting you?
I do have the bandwidth, because we've always decided to grow organically. Referrals. Okay. I don't run ads. I don't. At all. So everything has been repeat business and referral. So it was intentional, but so I'm happy to give you like something to put in your video presentation that flips to that has all of my information. But just for the people listening that may not see it visually, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn at KYLE SWA F as in Frank, OR, D as in David, ESQ. That stands for Esquire. So Kyle Swafford, ESQ. That's both Twitter and Instagram. LinkedIn is just Kyle Swafford. And we try to put out tips and content and whatnot. So feel free to reach out to me there. And then if you're looking to, maybe schedule a consultation, my email is Kyle, KYLE, at SwaffordLawLLC.com. Kyle at SwaffordLawLLC.com. And then, just please reference this YouTube page. That way that I'll kind of have the context of where you heard about us. And maybe in the YouTube description, Larry, I'll give you like a link where someone can go to my website, submit a contact us form, and I automatically get the email. So that'll probably be the easiest way for someone.
That definitely would be good. Yeah, because we've got a bunch of follow-up stuff after this that I'm going to need some stuff from you. Your job's not done here imparting your knowledge. I'm going to need some follow-up work, some homework for you.
I'd love to help, man. I want to give back. I want to give as much value as I can. So anything I can do to help out you and your community, please let me know.
I appreciate that. Yeah, real estate investing has been a definite blessing. So, well, Kyle, thank you. We'll be in contact with you on multiple occasions. So, and for the subscribers, just keep trying to level up. Don't let the fear factor stop you. Make sure that you guys aren't stuck in analysis paralysis. Actually take some action, and we'll see you next time. We love you guys. Have a great night.
Thank you.